Welcome to Make Peace with Food. I'm your host, Emily LaVoie, a certified eating psychology coach. I own a virtual private practice, and I work with clients all over the world, one-on-one and in group programs, to help heal their relationship with food and improve body image. Here at Make Peace with Food, we believe food is not your enemy, that eating should be fun and bring you joy and pleasure, not stress and guilt. To keep this a safe space, I will try my best to avoid mentioning numbers like calories and weight, as well as other potentially triggering content, but you know yourself best, so please avoid any episode topics that may not feel helpful to where you're at in your healing journey. This podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes. It's not a replacement for medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor does it provide a client or patient relationship. Consult your own provider on any changes you're thinking about making. Today's episode is brought to you by my one-on-one coaching. If you're curious about becoming a client and want to learn more about what it looks and feels like to receive support in healing your relationship with food and improving your body image, go to my website, emily-lavoie.com, to schedule a free 30-minute Zoom consultation. Welcome to episode 14. Here we go. Before we dive in, as always, I'll start with a little update. So one of the things that I don't always start out with this in session with clients, but sometimes I do. I will ask them what has been on their plate lately, which is one question, but a two-part answer. So I want to know what has been on their physical plate. So maybe something that they've been eating recently that they're really enjoying, or maybe it's nostalgic, or they tried a new food. The second part of the question is more like what's been on your plate, like what's been going on in your life. Just kind of take a moment to update me with like, do you have, what is the saying? Like, I have so much on my plate. I've had too much on my plate, but I just kind of want to know what's been going on in your life since I talked to you last. So I think I'll share what's been on my plate lately. So my neighbors actually invited my husband and I and another couple over for dinner, and she made something called chicken shawarma, which I have never had before. I think it's Middle Eastern, I'm pretty sure. And I'm in love. Oh my goodness, the flavors. And I think the reason I'm so drawn to it is I think she used a lot of herbs and spices in the recipe that I don't commonly cook with. I don't even think I have them in my house. I think if I were going to make this recipe myself, I would have to buy a ton of herbs and spices, which is fine. But we ended up making chicken shawarma. It was like a bowl. And so there's this like deliciously flavored chicken, but then you could add this, like these different sauces. Again, these sauces had these flavor profiles that I'm not used to eating. And I think there was like rice or quinoa. And then she had a bunch of different chopped up vegetables that you could put on. And I think like you could put hummus in it. It was very garlicky. But then like one of the things you could add was like chopped up pickles, which I was like, I don't know about this. And she's like, try it. That's my favorite part of chicken shawarma. So I tossed in some chopped up pickles. Anyway, if you ever get the chance to eat at a Middle Eastern restaurant, I know there's kind of like a fast food chain restaurant that's around in bigger cities called Naf Naf Grill. And like its logo's a camel, I think, and like orange. Anyway, they have chicken shawarma, and I definitely recommend trying it if you're feeling adventurous. What's been on my life plate? Summer, hot weather, boating, spending a lot of time outside with my dog. I spend a lot of time watering plants every day in the summer. And I like that because it just allows me to get some vitamin D and check out, the wildlife and get fresh air. So yeah, that's what's been on my figurative and literal plate lately. Okay, today's episode, we're talking about the 4 different types of hunger. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because I feel like, I feel like children should be taught this. And I think when people learn what I'm going to teach you today, their relationship with food starts improving because they can better assess what is going on in their body, what they're desiring, what is actually drawing them to the food. And the reason we want to know about the 4 different types of hunger is because we want to figure out when we're being drawn to food, which type of hunger that draw to food is rooted in. Sometimes it's not just one. There can be multiple types of hunger that we're experiencing at once. We'll get into this. But yeah, we want to know which type of hunger we're experiencing so that we can best support ourselves in satisfying the type of hunger that it is we're experiencing, because that is our goal with every meal. I talked in great depth about satisfaction in the previous episode 13. So go ahead and give that a listen if you have not yet. Okay, diving in. There are 4 different types of hunger. We're going to say the first type of hunger is physical hunger. We're going to say the second type of hunger is taste hunger. Third type of hunger is emotional hunger. And fourth type of hunger is practical hunger. So we're going to start with physical hunger today. So I think we're all pretty aware of what physical hunger is. But physical hunger is the need for energy from food. I'm repeating that. Physical hunger is the need for energy from food. So when we experience physical hunger, our body is trying to communicate to us that it needs energy or vitamins or minerals or protein. Our digestive system is empty and it needs to be filled so that we can get this energy from food. Typically, we think of physical hunger as something that we feel in our stomach. But there are ways we can experience physical hunger that exist outside of our stomach. And this is something that can be helpful to pay attention to, because if we have a history of dieting, we might be very out of touch with our physical hunger, because diet culture tells us that we should ignore physical hunger or avoid eating when we're physically hungry or push it off as long as possible. And this is actually the worst thing that we could do. And so if we have a history of dieting and we, are celebrating the fact that we are ignoring our hunger or controlling our appetite and our hunger can go offline. And part of intuitive eating, like a huge part of intuitive eating, is getting our hunger signals or our hunger cues to come back online and to honor our hunger and not try to control it or manipulate it or avoid eating. We want to eat when we kind of start feeling subtle hunger, because the longer we push off physical hunger, the hungrier and hungrier and hungrier we get. And we are putting ourselves at risk to a term I don't love, but I'm going to use because I know you'll know what it means, overeating. But instead of overeating, I tend to prefer the term eating to the point of uncomfortable fullness, or even putting ourselves at risk to binge eat, which is like eating to the point of painful fullness. When we eat kind of at some of those first signs and cues of physical hunger, we are much more likely to be able to stop at a point of comfortable fullness versus going too far. Physical hunger, we're used to feeling that in our stomach, which is usually like stomach growling or like an empty feeling or a gnawing feeling in the stomach. But we want to start paying attention to ways that we experience and feel physical hunger outside of our stomach. So some examples of that would be sometimes we might notice ourselves feeling a little bit fatigued or lacking energy. We might notice ourselves getting a little bit more anxious, a feeling of like a little bit of, just slight or mild anxiety. Or if you're somebody who struggles with anxiety, you might notice your anxiety getting worse. That can be kind of a red flag that some physical hunger is going on. Some people kind of get a headache when they are experiencing physical hunger. When physical hunger gets pretty severe, a lot of times people will also be experiencing a blood sugar drop, and we might notice some shakiness, a feeling of shakiness in our hands. Some people kind of get like a like a rapid heartbeat where their heart rate might increase. You might notice yourself just thinking about food more. And something that happens to me is like when I am maybe starting to experience physical hunger, but I'm not really aware of it, I'll notice myself just like having a hard time concentrating. Like my mind is kind of wandering. Something else I notice is I might start opening and closing and reopening and reclosing the refrigerator often, like just kind of wondering what the options are. So those are some ways that physical hunger might be presenting itself outside of our stomach that we want to start making a mental note of. Some people, oh my gosh, I've heard people say like, yeah, if I start yawning a lot, that's actually, my individual sign that I'm starting to experience some subtle cues of physical hunger. Other people would say like, yeah, I kind of noticed that just like my mouth has like more saliva in it, like more salivating happening. Or you might notice it like other people eating and like the smell of their foods might be more appealing, and then you kind of start getting hungry. The only way to take care of physical hunger is to eat. Period. Full stop. The only way to take care of physical hunger is to eat. Sorry, Cosmo magazine or whatever stupid diet, article you're reading online or wherever, where they're talking about like ways to suppress hunger by like drinking water or chewing gum or drinking coffee. Like F all of that. We don't want to suppress hunger. There is one thing that works to suppress hunger. It works every single time, and that is food. We suppress hunger by eating actual food that we find desirable and tasty and satisfying. So yeah, stop believing that there might be some sort of appetite suppressant that exists or will exist someday. Being hungry doesn't make you a bad person, for Christ's sake. Your appetite is not something that needs to be controlled or manipulated or micromanaged. Okay, moving on to what we're going to call the second type of hunger, taste hunger. Taste hunger occurs when we have a taste or a craving for a specific food. Basically, taste hunger is when a food just sounds good. An example of pure taste hunger might be if you've just eaten a satisfying meal at a restaurant and you feel quite full and satisfied, but then the server brings over the dessert menu and suddenly you feel taste hungry when you see something appealing on the dessert menu. So an example for me would be like I might have had a great meal at a restaurant and I might feel pretty full and satisfied, but if there's creme brulee on the dessert menu, I'm probably going to start experiencing taste hunger for creme brulee and then like be like, yeah, I might want to order that. Is there anybody else who wants to share it with me? Or in a different scenario, I might be like, no, you know what? I'm already pretty full. If I got the creme brulee, even though it sounds really good, that would contribute to me experiencing like uncomfortable or painful fullness right now. So yes, creme brulee sounds good, but I think I'm going to get it another time when I'm not so physically full and it wouldn't lead to uncomfortable fullness. Taste hunger is a valid form of hunger. Diet culture tries to tell us that taste hunger is not valid or not real, or if we're experiencing taste hunger that we quote unquote shouldn't eat. And I feel like that is false. And I want to say like, just because you're experiencing taste hunger doesn't mean that you have to eat, but if you're experiencing taste hunger, you definitely can eat. It's a real and valid form of hunger and deserving of food. You are allowed to eat when you're not hungry just because something sounds or looks good. I want to give you an example of how taste hunger might present itself alongside physical hunger. So sometimes, like these types of hunger don't exist in a vacuum. So they can present singularly or they can present simultaneously. So say, I gave you the example of having a really satisfying meal at a restaurant that filled you up and then you're full, but you're still experiencing taste hunger. So that's taste hunger kind of happening individually. But say I was experiencing taste hunger and physical hunger simultaneously. That would look and sound like I am craving pizza. Pizza sounds really, really good right now, but I'm also hungry. And it's been several hours since I've eaten last, and my stomach feels empty, and I'm having trouble concentrating. So that would be physical hunger presenting at the same time as taste hunger for pizza. Okay, so if I was experiencing taste hunger for pizza and physical hunger, do you think I should eat a chicken breast and a bowl of sauteed spinach? Do you think that would satisfy me? There is not like hard and fast rules for this. So if you are physically hungry and experiencing taste hunger for pizza, I would say yeah, if you can get yourself some pizza, you are probably going to be very satisfied when you eat some pizza. You might have some pizza and a salad with the pizza. That would be probably even more satisfying because that kind of contains a couple different components and the variety that contributes to satisfaction. But there's going to be other times where you really have a craving for pizza, but you don't have that much time. It takes a long time to order a pizza and have it get delivered, or to make a pizza, or you don't have all of the ingredients, or you just don't feel like leaving the house because it's getting late. So then I would say, hey, eat what you have at home. Still try to create as satisfying a meal as you possibly can, but you might want to think about getting yourself some pizza sometime in the very near future because pizza is delicious. And it's okay to eat for taste hunger. Now we're going to talk about, kind of continue on this route that we're on where there's taste hunger for pizza along with physical hunger. Because I know that you guys have experienced this, and I certainly have experienced it. Say I was experiencing physical hunger. My stomach is empty. It's been several hours since I last ate, alongside taste hunger for pizza. Say I'm okay, cool. I actually have a frozen pizza. It's going to take me about 15 minutes till it's ready, but that's okay. And say I eat 3 or 4 pieces of the pizza and I'm wow, I'm physically full. I am no longer experiencing physical hunger, but this pizza is so good. I want to eat. I want to keep eating. I'm not done yet. I want another slice. So I'm physically full, not experiencing physical hunger, but I'm still experiencing taste hunger for pizza. When we are putting something into practice in intuitive eating called full unconditional permission to eat, we'll talk a lot about this. There'll be an entire episode on full unconditional permission to eat. We basically know that more tasty food is coming in the future, and we don't have to satisfy every single taste hunger or craving that we're experiencing. So in this scenario that I'm currently talking about, where I've had 3 or 4 pieces of pizza, I am no longer experiencing physical hunger, but I still want to keep eating another piece or 2 of pizza because it is just so delicious and I'm not ready to be done yet. Sometimes the right answer might be, yeah, have another slice, but that might take you to uncomfortable fullness. That's okay. That food is still going to digest. You're going to experience physical hunger again in another handful of hours. Or in a different scenario, that might play out as, I'm physically full. I'm still experiencing taste hunger for pizza because pizza is so delicious. I do want to have another slice, but yeah, I just I have a lot to do. And I know that when I experience uncomfortable fullness, I tend to just feel really lousy, and I'll probably end up just not accomplishing these things I wanted to get done this afternoon. So I'm just going to wrap this pizza up and I can enjoy it another time. So when you have been practicing full unconditional permission to eat, you know that more tasty food is coming in the future. So that urgency to fulfill every experience of taste hunger starts to kind of dissipate, and you have an easier time. Just I would like to have another piece of pizza that will contribute to uncomfortable fullness. That's just not a way I want my body to feel right now. So I'm going to pack this pizza up and I will enjoy the leftovers tomorrow. All right, moving on to emotional hunger. Emotional hunger is when you have an unmet emotional need and it presents itself as the desire to eat food. A phrase that I'm sure you have heard is emotional eating. And that's a phrase I kind of sort of hate, but I use it because people know what I'm talking about when I use it. Diet culture hates on emotional eating. And I feel like using the term emotional hunger is a lot more like morally neutral and not as stigmatized. It's not like, labeled as quote unquote bad by diet culture. So that's why I kind of choose to use emotional hunger instead of emotional eating. We, as humans, we have unmet emotional needs. And sometimes those unmet emotional needs are kind of pulling us to food or pulling us to eat because food can be a coping mechanism. And you're not a bad person if you feel like, oh, I'm super frustrated and I just want to eat a really fudgy brownie right now. That doesn't make you a bad person. But one of the things I try to help my clients with, if they feel like they're really struggling with experiencing emotional hunger all of the time, is I want to give them a toolbox so that when they have an unmet emotional need, food is not the only coping mechanism or coping strategy that they have to use in order to cope with that unmet emotional need. So I want them to have a toolbox where they can kind of say, hey, I have an unmet emotional need right now. Food is an option, but I have like 30 other options. Maybe I'm going to call my mom and vent. Maybe I'm going to go outside and get some fresh air. Maybe I want to just go to the gym and blow off some steam. Maybe I'm super frustrated because my boss is an asshole and I'm going to type an email to the boss and probably not send it if you're super frustrated. Maybe reread it tomorrow. Maybe I need to have a conversation with my boss and we need to come to a better understanding. So yes, food can help us cope, but we don't want it to be the only thing that we turn to over and over and over again when we are experiencing an unmet emotional need. Emotional hunger, just like taste hunger, is a valid form of hunger. It is not something that we need to, we don't need to try to control ourselves and never, ever eat for emotional purposes. Like I said, we don't want it to be the only thing that we turn to. So as we are first trying to be more aware of the type of hunger it is that we're experiencing when we notice ourselves being drawn to food, it can be extremely hard for people to distinguish physical hunger from emotional hunger. Some ways to tell if it's emotional hunger is that it tends to come on very quickly and in conjunction with intense emotions. You might have also recently eaten or feel the need for comfort, security, or distraction more so than the need for energy. So we tend to feel physical hunger in our stomach, whereas emotional hunger, we tend to feel a little bit more in our head, if that makes sense. A lot of times, similarly to taste hunger, emotional hunger will present itself as like a craving for something very specific. So emotional hunger and taste hunger a lot of times kind of show up simultaneously, whereas physical hunger kind of comes on more slowly if we are paying attention to some of our subtle hunger cues. And it may have been a few hours since we last ate. When it's physical hunger, a lot of times physical hunger, if there's not taste hunger associated with it, it's kind of like, anything will satisfy. It's like, it's a lot less specific. We feel the need for energy, like I said, and physical hunger. Yeah, we feel it in our stomach. We feel tired, shaky, or empty. So it does take practice to kind of start distinguishing emotional hunger from physical hunger. So if you feel like you're struggling with this, you're normal. You are a setting on a dryer, normal. Number 4, practical hunger. This is easy. Practical hunger isn't even necessarily hunger per se, but it's rather a need to eat in response to anticipated future hunger that will be happening down the road that you might not be able to satisfy. So an example would maybe be if you eat a really large meal before you go on a really long plane ride where you know you won't have access to food, but you feel like you would get hungry during that long plane ride. Or another example of practical hunger is like maybe you're not hungry, but it's lunchtime. And even though you're not hungry, you're going to eat, because if you don't eat now, you're not going to be able to eat for like many, many, many more hours. And you know that you would then be experiencing extreme, uncomfortable physical hunger. So practical hunger is just like, a lot of times I'm not hungry, but I'm going to eat right now because it's the smarter decision. And I'm going to eat right now because I have a future conflict in my schedule when I think physical hunger would present itself. So it's kind of eating in anticipation for future physical hunger. And this is a really, really good idea to do regularly when we are trying to heal our relationship with food. If we have like a long history of dieting, we want to kind of start putting practical hunger into practice. So if you're a person that doesn't eat breakfast regularly, you might say like, I don't feel hungry in the morning. But if you notice that you're eating to the point of uncomfortable fullness in the afternoon or struggling with binge eating in the afternoon or evening, I would highly recommend, even though you might not be experiencing physical hunger in the morning, I want you to put practical hunger into practice. I want you to kind of eat breakfast or eat, within an hour or two of waking up, because once you start doing that, you probably will start experiencing physical hunger in the morning. It's just that your body is not used to eating in the morning, or maybe you're just not able to feel those physical, subtle signals of physical hunger in the morning. But like a lot of times, if we're struggling with overeating or binge eating in the afternoon, evening, it can be because we're allowing ourselves to get too hungry. And like I said earlier, some of those subtle hunger cues are offline because of our dieting history, because we've been ignoring them for so long. And in order to get them to come back online, we start eating to honor practical hunger, even if you can't feel it. The biggest takeaway from this conversation today, I hope that you got, is taste hunger and emotional hunger are valid forms of hunger. You can eat when something sounds good, even if you're not physically hungry. You can eat if you have an unmet emotional need. You're allowed to eat food for emotional reasons if you have an unmet emotional need. And then you might start to kind of pay attention to, did that satisfy that unmet emotional need? Or next time I'm experiencing an unmet emotional need, do I want to pull a different tool out of my toolbox and maybe not turn to food every single time? The goal from this episode, what I really want you to start putting into practice. I'm going to tell you what I want to happen, but I know that's not exactly what's going to happen because this is hard. We've never paid attention to this stuff before. So I'm going to tell you what the goal is, what I want you, like what the desired outcome, but I'm going to tell you what is actually going to happen. So ideally, if you notice yourself being drawn to food, what I would want you to do is pause for a second and just ask yourself, which of the 4 types of hunger or hungers am I experiencing right now? Because that is going to best help me support myself in achieving satisfaction, to satisfy that specific type of hunger. But usually when we're drawn to food, we're so used to just eating. So what is actually going to happen is you're going to forget to push pause and check in to figure out which type of hunger it is that you're experiencing. So a lot of times in the beginning, when we're starting to utilize these tools, and I think of these 4 types of hunger as a tool, actually, as a way to support ourselves and heal our relationship with food, what's going to happen? You're going to be done eating. And you're going to be like, oh shit, I was supposed to check in with which type of hunger I was experiencing before I started eating, and now I'm done and I didn't do it. Like, I'm such a failure. I suck. It's okay. It's okay if you forget. That's what happens to everybody when we first start putting this into practice. So even if you're done, you can kind of like try to like rewind and say like, oh, I didn't do this before I started eating, but I do remember being really lonely when I first started eating. That was probably emotional hunger that I was experiencing. Or, I just finished eating, but I do remember feeling like my stomach was growling. And I do remember that it had been like 4 hours, 5 hours since I last ate. I think that was physical hunger. Or I forgot to check in with my type of hunger, but I definitely knew I wanted tacos. Okay, that was probably taste hunger for tacos and maybe the presence or absence of physical hunger as well. So you can kind of like retroactively try to do it. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you're kind of mid-meal and you're like, oh shit, I was supposed to check in with my type of hunger. Darn it, I didn't do it. But even though it's the middle of the meal, you can kind of check in like, where am I at as far as physical fullness right now? Am I still experiencing hunger, or am I starting to lean towards the side the side of physical fullness? Am I still really enjoying the tastes and flavor profiles that I'm eating? Okay, I'm still experiencing taste hunger. I still have cravings to eat these specific foods. Yeah, so eventually you'll kind of get to the point where you are, oh my gosh, I noticed myself being drawn to food. Let me just pause for a second. This doesn't mean I'm not going to eat. I'm just going to hit pause so I can figure out which type of hunger it is I'm experiencing. Then I'm going to so much better be able to satisfy this type of hunger and achieve satisfaction and fullness. Yeah, so start trying to put this into practice. Don't get angry at yourself if you're not quote unquote perfect. I don't even want you to try to be perfect, actually. That should never, ever be your goal, because that's like way too diety, right? Diets are like perfect and you're either failing or being perfect. I just want you to what's that saying? I used to say it in college a lot. C's get degrees. I just want you to aim for a C. Just try to think about it. And if you guys have questions that come up, as always, feel free to schedule a free consultation. I would love to help support you in these ways. That's the show. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, I'd be so grateful if you take a minute to follow or subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review on Apple, Spotify, or whatever podcast platform you're listening on. It helps others to find the podcast and continue spreading this important information to more people who need to hear it. This podcast is made possible by paid supporters at patreon.com/makepeacewithfood. They're truly what keep this show going so that I can pay my assistant, editor, producer, and allow me to keep sharing all of this content and doing this important and needed work with you all. Go to patreon.com/makepeacewithfood to sign up for as little as $3 per month. Make Peace with Food is hosted by me, Emily LaVoie. It's produced and edited by Jake Lamore at Pathfinder. Thank you so much for your support.